So there I was, standing in a courtroom, watching a judge sentence me to 30 days in jail for being 3 weeks late on child support payments, when my phone buzzed with a text that would make me question everything I thought I knew about my life. Congratulations, you've been punked for 6 years. Check your DNA, dummy. Hi, I'm Greg, and apparently I've been starring in a reality show called World's Dumbest Dad without knowing it. The prize? A $63,000 loss, and a masterclass in how gullible one man can be. Let me paint you a picture. 6 years ago, I was a 28-year-old warehouse worker who thought ramen noodles were a food group and that investing meant buying scratch-off tickets. I was dating Diane, a woman who could make me believe the sky was purple if she batted her eyelashes right. The night she told me she was pregnant, we were sitting in her beat-up Honda outside my apartment complex. She was crying, real tears, or what I now know were Oscar-worthy fake ones, saying she didn't know what to do. Being the knight in shining armor that I am, I took her hand and said, "Don't worry, baby, we'll figure this out together." What a romantic fool I was. What I didn't know was that 2 weeks before this tearful confession, Diane had spent a cozy weekend with her just a friend, Marcus, while I was out of town at my cousin's wedding, probably discussing the weather and definitely not making babies. But here's the kicker. When little Tommy was born, I was there. Cut the cord, held him first, the whole 9 yards, and when I looked into his eyes, I was hooked. This was my boy. I would have fought bears for this kid. Unfortunately, I should have been fighting lawyers instead. Fast forward 6 years of $800 monthly payments. That's right, $800 every month. I was living in a studio apartment so small I had to step outside to change my mind. I was eating cereal for dinner and considering it a luxury meal when I splurged on the name brand milk. But Tommy? Tommy had everything. Birthday parties, new clothes, toys that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. And I was proud of that. Even when I lost my job at the warehouse and had to choose between rent and child support, I chose Tommy. Even when that choice landed me in county jail for 30 days, sharing a cell with a guy named Knife who collected belly button lint as a hobby. The anonymous text came right after I got out of jail. Some random number sending me cryptic messages like I was living in a bad thriller movie. First it was, "You ever wonder why Tommy doesn't look like you?" Then, 6 years is a long time to be played. Now, normal people would probably ignore texts like that. But here's the thing about spending 30 days in jail. It gives you a lot of time to think. And the more I thought about it, the more things started adding up in ways that made my stomach feel like I'd swallowed a calculator. I started looking at pictures of Tommy differently, really studying them. The kid was cute, don't get me wrong, but he looked about as much like me as I look like The Rock. Which is to say, not at all. So I did what I should have done 6 years ago. I ordered a DNA test online. Had to get creative about the sample collection though. Took Tommy to the park, bought him ice cream, and when some dripped on his face, I offered to clean it up. Smoothest cotton swab operation in parenting history. 2 weeks later, the results came back. 0% probability of paternity. 0, zilch, nada. I had a better chance of being related to the mailman. That's when the anonymous texter got bold. "I know what you did. The question is, what are you going to do now?" Armed with DNA evidence and 6 years of suppressed rage, I marched over to Diane's house. I'd rehearsed my speech, practiced staying calm, prepared for denials and excuses. What I wasn't prepared for was opening the door and finding Marcus on the couch, in his underwear, eating cereal from a bowl that looked suspiciously like the one I'd bought Tommy for his 4th birthday. "You knew," I said, holding up the DNA results. "Both of you knew this whole time." Diane tried to slam the door, but rage gives you superpowers apparently. I pushed back, not hard, just enough to keep the conversation going. "I went to jail for this kid, Diane. I lived on ramen noodles for 6 years. Marcus stood up, all cocky and shirtless. "You need to leave, man." That's when Tommy appeared in the hallway, rubbing his eyes. "Daddy?" he said, looking confused. But here's the thing. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Marcus. And Marcus, without missing a beat, said, "It's okay, son. Go back to your room." Son. He called him son. Right in front of me. The man I'd been financially supporting for 6 years called another man's child son, while I stood there like an idiot holding DNA results. What happened next got me a restraining order, but honestly, worth it. Let's just say Marcus learned that warehouse workers have very strong opinions about deception, And sometimes those opinions are expressed through interpretive dance. Aggressive interpretive dance. As security dragged me away, I noticed something that made everything so much worse. There was a family photo on their mantle. Diane, Marcus, and Tommy at the beach, all smiles and matching outfits. The date stamp? 4 years ago. They'd been playing house while I'd been playing the fool. But here's where the story gets interesting. While I was being escorted out, I may have accidentally grabbed Diane's phone, and what I found in her text messages made child support fraud look like jaywalking. 6 years of texts between Diane and Marcus, planning my financial destruction like it was a hobby. What if the baby looks like you? G will know. Don't worry, mixed babies can look like anything. He'll never question it. And later, G's behind on payments again. We need that money for the vacation. Just take him back to court. Judge always sides with single moms. They were using my child support payments like their personal ATM, planning vacations, buying furniture, living their best life while I was living my worst one. But then I found something that made me realize this wasn't just fraud. It was a full-scale operation. Messages about other guys, other fathers paying support for kids that weren't theirs. Diane and Marcus had turned deception into a profitable business model. That's when I made a decision that would either save my life or end it spectacularly. I decided to play their game, but by my rules. First, I sent myself copies of everything from Diane's phone. Then, I did something that probably sounds crazy. I texted Marcus from Diane's phone. G knows everything. About the paternity, about the other guys, about the money. He's going to the police tomorrow. The response was immediate. I'll take care of it. Now, I'll take care of it could mean a lot of things. Maybe he'd flee the country. Maybe he'd lawyer up. Maybe he'd send me a fruit basket with an apology note. But given that I just discovered I was dating someone who could teach a masterclass in deception, I wasn't taking any chances. That night, I checked into a motel and waited. Sure enough, at 4 a.m., the security system on my apartment sent me an alert. Someone was inside. The camera footage showed Marcus searching through my stuff, looking for evidence. What he found was exactly what I wanted him to find. Fake DNA results showing I was Tommy's father, and a fake letter to my lawyer saying I was dropping the whole thing. Meanwhile, the real evidence was already with my actual lawyer, along with something else I'd discovered. Remember those text messages? Well, mixed in with all the fraud planning were some interesting financial records. Monthly payments from Diane's account to someone named Wilson. Judge Wilson, the same judge who'd sent me to jail for falling behind on child support. Turns out, Diane had been bribing the judge for years, ensuring that every court appearance went her way. $30,000 over 6 years, all funded by my child support payments. I was literally paying for my own persecution. The next morning, I walked into family court like a man with nothing left to lose. Because honestly, what else could they take? My dignity was already gone, my bank account was empty, and my faith in humanity was somewhere in the negative numbers. Judge Wilson's face when he saw me was priceless. Like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar if the cookie jar was filled with bribes and the kid was wearing a judge's robe. I'd filed an emergency petition to terminate child support based on new evidence. Diane was there with her lawyer, looking confident. Marcus was conveniently absent, probably hiding under a rock somewhere. Your Honor, Diane's lawyer began, this is merely a desperate attempt by the respondent to avoid his financial responsibilities. Judge Wilson was already reaching for his gavel, ready to shut me down again. That's when I stood up. Your Honor, before you rule, I'd like to submit new evidence that has recently come to light. I approached the bench and handed him a sealed envelope. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from excitement. This was my moment. What is this? He asked, clearly annoyed. That, Your Honor, is a complete record of every bribe payment made from Diane Taylor to your personal account over the past 6 years, totaling $30,000. I've also sent copies to the State Bar Association, the Judicial Review Board, and the FBI. The courtroom went so quiet you could hear a pin drop in the next county. Judge Wilson's face went through more color changes than a chameleon having an identity crisis. Instead of calling security, instead of having me thrown out, he did something that told me everything I needed to know. He called for a recess and practically sprinted from the courtroom like his robe was on fire. That's when I knew I had them. The deal came quickly after that. In a private conference room filled with lawyers and court reporters, Diane admitted to everything. Paternity fraud, judicial bribery, operating a multi-victim scam. It was like Christmas morning, if Christmas involved watching your life's biggest problem implode in real time. But just when I thought I could ride off into the sunset, Diane played her final card. "Tommy has a rare blood condition," she said, tears streaming down her face. "The treatments cost thousands each month. Without your insurance from the child support order, he could die." And there it was, the ultimate guilt trip. Do I walk away completely, knowing a child might suffer? Or do I continue being the world's most expensive doormat? I looked her dead in the eyes and said something that surprised even me. "That's funny, because according to his medical records, the only condition Tommy has is an allergy to the truth." Yeah, I'd subpoenaed his medical records too. The blood condition? Fake. The expensive treatments? Fake. The tears? Probably fake too, but I'd given up trying to tell the difference. The look on Diane's face was worth every penny I'd lost. She never expected me to be 3 steps ahead. As I walked out of that courthouse, my phone buzzed with a text from that mysterious number. "Well played, Greg. Game recognizes game." It's been a year since that day. Judge Wilson resigned and fled to a country without extradition treaties. Diane and Marcus are facing multiple fraud charges and have about as much chance of avoiding prison as I had of winning the lottery with those scratch-offs. The back child support I owed? Gone. The money I'd already paid? Some of it's coming back through the civil suit, though I'll never see most of it. Turns out funding someone else's life for 6 years doesn't come with a satisfaction guarantee. People ask me if I'm bitter, if I hate them for what they did. Honestly, I'm too busy laughing to hate anyone. I mean, think about it. I spent 6 years as an unwitting participant in the most expensive practical joke in history. I've got stories that would make reality TV producers weep with joy. But there's one piece of this puzzle that still keeps me up at night. Tommy, that kid didn't ask for any of this. Didn't ask to be born into a family that makes soap operas look realistic. Didn't ask for his mom to use him as a human ATM card. So I did something that probably seems insane. I filed for visitation rights. Not because I'm legally obligated, not because he's biologically mine, but because for 6 years, I was the only father figure that kid had who wasn't actively scamming him. Diane fought it, of course, said I had no rights, that I wasn't family. But I had one last surprise up my sleeve. Remember that anonymous texter who started this whole thing? Turns out it was Marcus. He'd grown a conscience, probably the first one he'd ever owned, and was tired of watching Diane destroy everyone in her path. He agreed to testify that I'd been more of a father to Tommy than he ever was, that despite everything, I'd shown up, I'd cared, I'd sacrificed. The judge, a new one, thankfully, granted me supervised visitation. I pick Tommy up every other Saturday now. Last week, I took him to the same park where I'd secretly collected his DNA a year ago. While he was playing on the swings, he looked over at me and said, "Greg, why doesn't Mommy like you anymore?" I thought about it for a minute, then said, "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, buddy. Big ones. But that doesn't mean we stop caring about the people who matter." He nodded like that made perfect sense and went back to playing. Family isn't always about blood, folks. Sometimes it's about who shows up when they have every reason to walk away. Sometimes it's about loving someone even when loving them costs you everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, getting scammed for 6 years leads to something better than you ever imagined. Though, next time I'm dating someone, I'm definitely requiring a background check, 3 references, and a polygraph test. Because fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, and I'll probably end up with my own reality show.